All right, Aaron.
Hi, Santita. Can you hear me okay?
I sure can. Stand by. We're coming up.
Sounds good.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. We are streaming on am950radio.com. You can listen to us on AM 950 Radio. And please go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, and catch the show. But also go to the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. I want to be your friend. I want you to be mine. I want you to be mine. We've got a lot to talk about today. Who did you have in the Super Bowl? Huh? Did you have a broken heart? Or were you thrilled by the result? Let me know what happened for you, everybody. Of course, this is pre-taping, letting you doing this before the Super Bowl. There's so much going on that is garnering our attention. And of course, we're in the throes of the election 2024 cycle. And once again, Donald Trump is at the center of things, at the very center of things, but so is President Biden. The former President Trump is at the center of things. Indeed, there is a case before the Supreme Court that concerns him. State of Colorado's Supreme Court threw him off the ballot, banned him from the ballot. He's protesting that. And when you listen to the questioning by the justices on the U.S. Supreme Court, they sounded skeptical. Almost in person down to Ketanji Brown Jackson. They sounded skeptical of the reasoning of the decision by the Colorado State Supreme Court to ban him from the ballot. So the question is today, who should be banned from the ballot? I mean, who does that? Should it be the courts or should it be you? Should you put people on the ballot and let the marketplace decide? It's already hard enough being on the ballot. If you're not a Democrat or a Republican, you ain't getting on that ballot, kids. That's what's awful about this. So, I think we're at a very critical moment in the history of the Republic in which we really have to move, I guess, out of childhood and adolescence into adulthood and really understand or figure out who we are. How do we become a more perfect union? Because it's really not about Trump as much as it is about who we are and how much weight states will have, how much weight the federal government's going to have, and what's going to be fair ultimately for everybody. So let's talk about this, everybody. Let's discuss Colorado's attempt to ban former President Donald Trump from the Colorado ballot in his current run for the presidency. And let's try to move this beyond President Trump to any candidate being banned. I say that because, our perceptions of people shift according to the times. Remember when Dr. King was alive, in real time, he was the most unpopular man in America. It's hard for us to wrap our minds around that. But even President Reagan made a crack about him as he signed his holiday into law. Made a crack about him being affiliated with communists. Remember that? But in real time, he was the most hated man in America. At that time that he was alive, one of the 10 most popular shows in America was the FBI. The head of the FBI, we didn't know. Well, those of us in the civil rights movement knew who J. Edgar Hoover was, but most Americans, J. Edgar Hoover was a hero. He was more popular than the president. This is someone who tried to blackmail Dr. King out of the movement and harassed people. He was the most powerful man in America because he held on to people's secrets while jealously guarding his own. So this case that is now before the Supreme Court had even conservative Chief Justice John Roberts worried. He believes that if the Colorado decision is upheld, other states will proceed with disqualification proceedings of their own for either Democratic or Republican candidates upon a partisan basis. And he said, and I quote, it will come down to just a handful of states that are going to decide the presidential election. That's a pretty daunting concept. So let me go to you, Attorney Darrell Jones, before you have to leave us today, the chairman of the Transformative Justice Coalition. And of course, we're joined by Aaron Niederman, brilliant young activist and political analyst from If Not Now. And of course, he's been working with Poor People's Campaign. He does so much wonderful work on behalf of those who are really living on the downside of advantage. And we're so grateful for his work. Speaking of which, we have an educator, a lawyer, a pastor, someone who's been active with Operation Push for more than 40 years. We love Reverend Jeanette Wilson Esquire, the head of the Push Excel program, one of Reverend Jackson's advisors. But let me go to you, Daryl, before you go. What do you make of, what are we to make of this case?
Sunita, I think that Santita, really what it comes down to is an understanding of what we're dealing with this case. And, folks say that, well, if Colorado and Maine and other states start saying that former President Trump should not be on the ballot and removes him from the ballot, then other states will find other reasons to remove presidential candidates from the ballot. And it will completely skew how we go through the process of elected presidents. All the southern states, all the conservative states decide that because of the border crisis, that President Biden has now created some type of insurrection for our country. So they're going to remove him from the ballot. All the state Supreme Courts decided to remove him from the ballot. That's what the Supreme Court, many of the Supreme Court justices are drawing up now. That's sort of the analysis that they're bringing forward. But I think it's a more basic question than that, because, this is one, and you've heard me say it over and over again, and I'll continue to say it. This is a question now for the Supreme Court to decide whether or not they're going to stake their integrity. Are they going to stake their ground? Are they going to stake their land, their position as the ultimate decider of cases in the United States? This is that moment for them. And if they punt by doing the analysis that they've already sort of preluded to, I think that's shameful. Because here's what the Supreme Court should be doing. This case comes down to two categories. People are saying, I understand and I agree, that you want to beat former President Bush at the former President Trump at the ballot box. I get it. This case comes down to two types of analysis. The first analysis is the qualification to hold the office. The second analysis is the electability of the person. Folks are focusing on the electability of the person. You want to beat them in the ballot box. That's electability. But before you get there, you have to be qualified to be on the ballot. And, the Constitution obviously is clear with regards to the age requirement of 35. It's clear with regards to the necessity that you be born in the United States. But the 14th Amendment, Section 3 is also equally clear that if you have aided, abetted, or have been an insurrectionist against the institution here, that you're not qualified to hold the office. And if and I've heard the analysis from folks saying that, well, he hasn't been proven to be an insurrectionist. You need to go back and look at that Colorado case, because what differentiated Colorado from Michigan, where Michigan did not preclude him from the ballot, is this. Colorado held a hearing to make a determination as to whether or not this was an action of insurrection, whether he was an insurrectionist. Not a criminal case, because the Constitution doesn't require a criminal case. It simply required a finding. And Colorado made that finding that he was an insurrectionist. They held the hearing. They had the evidence they needed to make that conclusion. So once they made that conclusion, the question then became whether or not they were going to implement Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. So what this case really comes to on the Supreme Court level is one of determining that qualification. Does former President Trump qualify to be on the ballot? That's that hard question. That's the reason why they give Supreme Court justices positions for life, so they can make those tough decisions without having to worry about standing up for an election because of what citizens think. They want them to follow the Constitution, to follow the law, and to make that determination. That's what this case is all about, is whether or not the Supreme Court now will have the temerity and integrity to do what the Constitution dictates that it should do, or are they going to try to punt and run in a political direction and hide for cover and hope that that the people, the voters, take care of former President Trump on the electability side in deciding that question? That's what this comes down to, Santita, in my estimation. And again, the Supreme Court has an opportunity right now to reestablish itself. It's the weakest, has the worst perception of all three structures of our government. The question now is, will they take the steps to remedy and to begin to build back their credibility? They're horribly, horribly hurt from Gorsuch all the way through Clarence Thomas. They're hurting. They're hurting. It's a hurting institution. They have the opportunity. Do they have the integrity and the temerity to do it?
No. I mean, and the fact is the quiet part's being said out loud. And in the last hour, I said, my question was, is he an insurrectionist? Because it's not enough to me for him to be declared one in Colorado and not one in Michigan and not one in Illinois. To me, this is where the whole state versus federal rights that becomes murky. So, I'm like, they got to be more definitive for me, because you know what? Dr. King was an outlaw in all 50 states and territories. I can't let Dr. King loose, because they made that man's life a living hell. Our government did that. So I just need some of those I need those answers. But I'm hearing you and feeling you. And what do you make before you go? What do you make of the apparent skepticism, at least that's what we saw initially, of the justices, including Ketanji Brown Jackson? What do you make of that?
Well, I can appreciate the skepticism that they're showing, but I think it's part of a bigger picture. And I think that bigger picture is this. They realize that they have two Trump cases that are going on. They have the immediate one that's here with determining whether or not he's qualified to run for the office of President of the United States. And now coming up, we're going to have the one on his criminal culpability, whether or not he's immune from being able to do what he wants to do and not be prosecuted for it. The two, I believe, are interrelated. They're interrelated to this degree. They're interrelated because if they find, as they probably will, that Section 3, the 14th Amendment's Section 3, for whatever reason, that doesn't apply to him, that they haven't proven he's an insurrectionist, it would create confusion amongst the states if we allow Colorado and Maine to do this and the other states don't do it. Okay, let's say they go down that road. They'll go down that road and they can say what they want to say now about it, because they're saying that when it comes to the question of his immunity, we're betting that we're going to say that he's not immune, that he can be criminally responsible for actions that he's taken. We are betting that what's going to happen now is that he's going to then try to cut some type of deal so that he is not prosecuted and imprisoned because of what's going on with the various cases across the country with him. That's how I see this. I understand their unreadiness and all the other things, but I really believe that they're doing this as a pair. They see the second case as the one that's going to push him away. The first case as the one to say, we don't need to get in the middle of this mess. Let's try to stand above this fray, and let's put him out there on the criminal side. And he's going to fold, and then that way the electability question and everything else will go away, and we can try to restore some of our integrity, whatever, from the Supreme Court. That's how I see it all playing out, Santita.
Well, we will see, Attorney, and thank you so much for being with us today. Sending you so much love, Attorney Darrell Jones, Chairman of the Transformative Justice Coalition. And of course, we'll be talking much more about the vote as we come through this election season. We've got to talk about that, about protecting the vote, because voter harassment is coursing on, and we're not having enough conversations about that. We're talking about protecting one person while neglecting the rights of the many. Attorney Darrell Jones, sending you much love. Thank you so much, Santita. And let's be certain we talk about the 7 states on the Earth's 8th Circuit that are now being treated as enslaved states with regards to voting rights from Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, because now those individuals, private individuals, the NAACP and Rainbow Push and all the other organizations cannot bring violations of the Voting Rights Act in those 7 states. Those people are unprotected. Only thing that's going to protect them is the Attorney General's office. And we've got to get that word up. We've got to have that discussion, Santita. Absolutely. We don't have
Thank
the
you so
right to
much.
say. Thank you so much. Reverend Jeanette Wilson, what do you make of this case with these seditious Americans? You know, Americans are seditious by nature. Aaron Niederman and Reverend Jeanette Wilson, you know, we will get down with a musket in a minute.
Well, I think that we're in some very difficult times. You have a former sitting president that decided to utilize the Insurrection Act. Well, he didn't use the act. He decided to be an insurrectionist in the backdrop of white supremacists and others who decided, based on his communications they found in social media, to take control of the Capitol. I think that Trump has been consistently trying to move our country towards a dictatorship. And in order to do that, one takes control of the media, the military. And you remember, he tried to march a group of generals, because he was at that time the commander in chief, to a particular location, to a church.
Mhm.
Could not get the military to do what the insurrectionists did. He could not get our standing army of armed forces to try to seize control of the Capitol, where all of the legislators were, in order to allow him to remain in power. And it's a very strange thing that we now are looking at this action by Trump, which was, it's a very early. The Insurrectionist Act was passed in, was it 1918? I have to, 1807. And so this man is reaching back to the post-slavery days. Remember when the states' rights writers were deciding to secede from the Union? I mean, he's taken us back to our time exiting slavery, when there were moves afoot around this nation to regain control by the southern states, to regain control of power. And that's why they kept pushing this states' rights agenda. We are looking today at those same 11 southern states individually. If you look at Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, North and South Carolina, aggressively trying to push a states' rights agenda. And even now, as Trump is being tried all across the country, multiple cases, multiple jurisdictions, this Colorado case is significant because it's really asking the question for the U.S. Supreme Court: does he have the authority and the right to enable an insurrection and remain on the ballot to run for the highest office in the land, where one is supposed to put your hand on the Bible and raise your right hand in order to affirm that that you plan to be bound by the United States Constitution. Here's a man that has said to us repeatedly, he does not support the Constitution. He will not follow the laws as written in our preamble and as following in all of the Bill of Rights and the amendments to the Constitution. He's not going to follow any of them. He has decided to move the country, the nation, to a dictatorship, and that's a very dangerous move because he has a House of Representatives and a body of people. He has taken control of one of the parties. We have a two-party system, basically. He's taken full control of the Republican Party. They can't pass any legislation that he does not agree with, and he's not a sitting president. This is how dangerous this is. He's manipulating the balance of power in our government. We have three chambers: the House, the Senate, and the House and Senate, Congress, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. He appointed five of those, I think five of the justices that sit on the United States Supreme Court, 5 out of 9. So we have a very, very all those he didn't appoint follow him. So he appointed 4, and you have Clarence Thomas and the others that support him. We're in a difficult time today.
You know, it's a difficult time. It's an interesting time because I think the quiet part now is being said out loud. We've had different leaders who've had dictatorial ambitions. I think I just when I think Trump we're having an honest moment, Reverend Wilson and Aaron Niederman. I think we're just having an honest moment. The quiet parts are being said out loud about racism, about women, just about everything. And remember, Americans are seditious. I mean, it's even embedded in the Constitution that if the government doesn't work, you can throw it over. You can overthrow it. I mean, it's just, that's just where Americans are. I'm not justifying January 6th because I have to tell you, when I saw all those people, all over the Capitol, I called my mother. I said, you need to turn on the television. She said, oh, no. I said, no. You haven't seen anything like this before. And I must tell you, at that moment, I was worried about several people I knew up there because I knew a lot of people there. But I was so glad that my brother Jesse was not there because it was frightening. I said, what are these people doing? You don't know what's happening. But I think Americans have been in a moment of distemper for quite some time. You've had the housing market that collapsed, the economy that, for all intents and purposes, collapsed. The University of Chicago's tuition is $100,000 a year for an undergraduate, baseline sticker price. You got 25, 30-year-olds living at home because they cannot afford to do anything else. We just have a mess. And I think he is emblematic. People who embrace him think that he's going to do something about it. Will he? No. But there it is.
No,
Aaron Niederman. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want
to bring on Aaron.
That, and I'll wait for Aaron.
Okay, Aaron. Because one of the questions I have is who should be deciding who gets on the ballot? Should it be the courts? Should it be the people? We think of Bush v. Gore. Yeah, I don't know. I think you might have completely missed that. It turns out Gore actually won Florida. Gore actually won the race in just the popular vote in the United States. But his brother, who was the sitting governor, no one said anything about this, Jeanette.
I remember that.
His father, who had been president, who had been the head of the CIA, they kicked this to the Supreme Court and he becomes president, and that's the end of that. Oh,
well,
now we got a million dead Iraqis.
I think the thing is, we have the Bush versus Gore. The people don't decide who's president anyway. You have this mythical thing called the Electoral College. And I ask you today, name the electors from your state. You can't, because there's some secret people that sit up in, it's like when they declare who's going to be Pope. They go in this little room until the smoke comes out. And the Electoral College needs to be abolished. I don't think the insurrection was the result of the masses of people deciding to take control of their government. These are a bunch of racist, skinheads, and other very, very, very right-wing people deciding to follow the mandate of the president, which is really, really very frightening. That's not like people who have been homeless, people who've been unhoused, people who've been unemployed. They weren't marching on the Capitol. These people were not marching.
But Reverend Wilson, some of them were. I've seen some of these documentaries and they've talked to people who were at the march at least that day. And Trump represents a whole range of people. Instead of talking about these people, we need to talk to them. This whole idea of him being most of his supporters being poor white folks, that's not true. Most of Hillary's supporters were affluent. Most of his supporters were affluent white people. 2/3 of them make $50,000 a year or more. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of misrepresentation. And I want to talk to these supporters because I'm bumping into black men who support him. And I want to know, because I'm not hostile to them, they are telling me why they support him. Okay, I want to hear. What are
Well,
you looking for?
I think some of
Right?
them, some people support him because he communicates in a way that people can understand what he's saying. Now, whether you agree with it or not, he makes it simple. For example, the Democratic Party keeps talking about we're preserving democracy. What does democracy mean to the
You
average
tell me.
person on the street? They don't know that word.
Girl, nobody cares about that. That is such a specious, ridiculous argument
It's just
that
crazy.
even the Democrats are pushing. I'm like, democracy, people want to be able to buy their groceries. Are you for real? And afford
People want
rent.
to be able to pay their bills, make a livable wage, and you're talking about some word called democracy. It means nothing.
Wait a minute, well, I've not been able to vote except for the past 50, 60 years. I mean, really? Come
Yeah.
on now. Wait a minute. Aaron Niederman, I think this
Yeah.
is legal, it's social, it's political, it's cultural. Do the courts decide who gets on the ballot? You know, if you're a Republican or a Democrat, if you're not a Republican or a Democrat, you ain't getting on the ballot. So there's a whole lot to unpack here, Aaron.
There is a lot to unpack here, Santita and Reverend Dr. Wilson. It's great to be here with both of you. And there is a lot to unpack here. And I think you're right, Santita, when you say that it seems like they're saying the quiet part out loud. This is a real, somewhat of a turning point, I would say, where this will allow Trump to make himself into a martyr. If he is kept off the ballot in this way, this feeds right into his narrative. And so I don't think that I have a legal argument to provide here of whether or not that he should be considered, an insurrectionist, whether he meets that standard. But instead, I think I come on the show today as a concerned citizen looking to make some sort of strategic argument, right? I think the question that I'm asking myself is, okay, not necessarily does he meet the standard of an insurrectionist, but what is the best decision that should be made that will strengthen our democracy, maybe class consciousness on some level, the people's understanding of systemic change and oppression, and just in general reinforce righteousness and morality. And we know that the people that support Trump are often gripped by some form of conspiracy. We know that they are seditious, definitely, like you mentioned, independent minded in certain ways. And if Trump is excluded from the ballot in this way, if this paternalistic decision is made on behalf of voters, on behalf of the public, this is just going to fuel that narrative. I listened to his press conference. He called the process, he said it was a beautiful process. He referred to what was going on as election interference. And he's already planted these seeds amongst his supporters. He's already, we saw it happen in 2020, and now he can lean on exactly the same narrative to pull his supporters again to become even more seditious. And so I think, whether or not the Supreme Court or whether or not Colorado should rule in this way, that is not for me to say, but instead just to push the idea that we need input from the public. We need a democratic process to decide who can or should not be on the ballot. Because if the decision is made for us on terms that people don't understand, right, these complex legal arguments, it's only going to incite more support and potentially even more violence down the way.
Well, because we all don't have, I'm not a lawyer, but I am a concerned citizen. And number one, I'm a citizen who has concerns, but as a citizen, this concerns me. So, I mean, I think that you have as much right to your opinion and your thoughts as anyone, as any lawyer here. We have Reverend Dr. Todd Urey, Esquire, who's joined us. Because at the end of the day, it really does come down to your perceptions, Aaron. I think that's a piece that a lot of people are missing. That, and that's something that Trump has mastered. Speaking to basic people, speaking in a way that's real basic. When I was at Fox News, I was told, and this was not condescending, but I was told that you need to frame your discussion for someone who is in sixth grade, not infantilizing Americans. But he said, don't. I remember Roger Ailes said to me, "Don't make it so complex. Keep it real simple. Put it down where the goats can get it. The great communicators always do." And there you have it. There's a lot of pain out here that we're not talking about, Aaron. And that's how a Trump is able to come to power. I mean, but what I is well, I think we've got to talk about that, and I think we've got to, Aaron, and you know this through your political organizing. I think it's important for us to begin to not just talk about people, but talk to them, Aaron, because you have some Republicans who want a ceasefire. You have some Republicans who are tired of the endless wars. You have some Republicans or people who identify as Republicans who want a lot of who want some things that we do. Why not talk to them? Why not find common cause with them so that we can all move together? What do you think, Aaron?
I mean, I think you're absolutely right, Santita. This does come from a place of pain. And, I think you often say it best when you say, hurt people hurt people. And I think this is definitely the case. And I guess, I know on some level around this idea, I kind of mentioned conspiracy previously. When people are met with so many issues in their life, whether it's paying groceries or affording their rent or not being able to work a living wage job, they feel all this pain of their daily experience, and they look for some sort of comprehensive way to understand this pain. It's hard for everyday people that are met with everyday struggles to have a nuanced understanding of the political system. And so when Trump says to them, you know what, it's the migrants, that's the issue. It makes everything so simple for them, and it becomes such a compelling narrative. And he's good at that. We can have critique of Trump from in so many ways, but no matter what, we have seen that he is a great communicator, especially to his base. And it's because he knows how to pull on these threads of pain and then speak in these grand ways that allow them to feel angry, to feel their own sense of righteousness. And I gotta say, I'm just worried that if this proceeds, this paternalistic move proceeds, we're only going to see it fuel the fire that has been stoking for a long time.
Reverend Dr. Uri, Esquire, who's going to decide? I mean, what first of all, what do you make of this Colorado case, and are the courts going to decide the election for us once again? Are we on track for that?
Well, the second question first, the short answer is, as we all learn in law school, it depends. What it depends upon, we're not yet sure. I think Brother Darrell Jones in his assessment is right. The court is trying to balance competing interests in a couple of cases that they must resolve. One is the Colorado case, but the other case is the immunity case. And I think that's the one that really has the most import in terms of, if he were to stay on the ballot, if he were to get reelected, is this court going to put guardrails up to make sure that he understands going in that there are limits to his constitutional authority? I think the issue has been that, as we did with test cases in civil rights, going all the way back to the 30s, I think these are test cases for Trump to know how much cover he's going to get from the court that he has basically formed. This is not the Roberts court. This is the Trump court. We saw it in terms of the affirmative action cases. We see it in terms of the voting rights cases. We hear some of the tone and the concern about whether or not a state Supreme Court can force the hand of the United States Supreme Court as it relates to the election of the leader of the federal government and the executive branch. And so I think this Supreme Court is wrestling with its own legitimacy. It is endeavoring to protect its own power and authority, and trying to say to other state Supreme Courts, this is not an avenue that you should go down. It's just like the whole issue around immigration. Immigration law is the sole purview of the federal government, not the states. The question is going to be, does the election of the president impute state power? Because to Reverend Dr. Wilson's point, the election of the president is not a single thing. It is the result of 50 different things, state elections that determine who the electors will be, who then convene in the electoral college to determine who's going to be the president. And so I think what we're getting is a civics lesson in short order, with an urgency that is attached to a sense of deep concern on both sides of the aisle, as they would say. It's not just whether or not Trump will be on the ballot. It is whether or not we will have a democracy if he remains on the ballot and should he be elected, because he had a dry run on January 6th. The next time, it is going to be, I think, a more permanent result, because he is going back with no intention of ever leaving office again. He is the strong man waiting in the wings. He's just trying to create the scenario and to test all of the propositions to determine whether or not he can pull it off before he's ultimately held accountable.
So what can we expect in this election cycle? I mean, do you think the Supreme Court's going to get in this, or are they going to punt?
I think the Supreme Court is going to allow him to stay. The Supreme Court will likely say that absent a conviction under federal statute, insurrection is in the criminal code.
Right.
He has not been convicted. That will then say that will lead the court to then say he cannot be on the basis of a charge of insurrection be kept off the ballot.
Well,
Now,
hold that, stay right there, because Attorney Jones said that because Colorado made that determination, he is an insurrectionist, at least in Colorado.
Yeah, but
and my question was, well, shouldn't that be something that is settled by all 50 states, not just one?
the problem you have, the U.S. attorney did not charge him with insurrection. Colorado can, and the statute doesn't require him to be charged, but he was not charged and convicted. And I guarantee you, it's what Dr. Urias said, the Supreme Court is going to punt by saying he was never charged or convicted with insurrection. Follow the state's rule, because right now voting rights is a state right. It is not a federally protected right, which is something that Jesse Jr. and Frank have been arguing for years. We want a federally protected right to vote. We don't have it. Every state decides on how elections will occur, who gets on the ballot, and under what conditions they can be removed. So he can be removed from Colorado, and they may send it back to him and say that, and every state would have to decide state by state.
Here's the issue. Insurrection is a federal crime. The states do not in and of themselves have the authority to enforce federal law. They can agree to be delegated the authority from the federal government, but Colorado was not delegated that authority. The states cannot enforce a violation. If the state of Colorado has an insurrection statute, then they have a jurisdictional problem. It's the standard problem. Can this court determine that an act that occurred outside of its borders violates its state's laws? And so this is really a fight over the legitimacy of the federal court system under the Constitution, as much as it is a determination about the reach and the role of the presidency. And so this Supreme Court is not going to give a state court the authority to claim jurisdiction over a federal matter. The January 6th insurrection happened at the U.S. Capitol. It happened in the District of Columbia, which is a federal district. The insurrection did not occur unless they can say that the former president had a role in helping to frame what became the insurrection. The conspiracy has ties to Colorado. Colorado, the court does not really have what we would call subject matter jurisdiction. And so this case has to fail. I would even think that the Supreme Court is going to point to the jurisdictional question that the Colorado Supreme Court cannot make an ultimate decision about whether or not a presidential candidate can be removed from the ballot based on an alleged act that occurred outside of its borders. That's one of the ways that I think they get to the core of the matter in a way that most lawyers, most legal scholars will respect that determination. And here's where it comes down. Remember, Dred Scott was not an issue of the rightness or the wrongness of Dred Scott's claim. Dred Scott was determined and decided on the basis of jurisdiction, that he did not have standing to bring that complaint. I think we're going to have a standing conclusion that's going to help the Supreme Court avoid a huge crisis and set us up for a much wider and broader insurrection the next time.
Aaron, what do you see as the political fallout in either direction?
Can you tell me what you mean by either direction?
Well, if he's allowed to be on the ballot, politically, where does that go? If he's pulled from the ballot, Chief Justice Roberts said these are daunting consequences. I don't know if you all want to do this.
Yeah, well, I think that if he's allowed to be on the ballot, the fact that he was taken through this process is still going to allow him to galvanize his supporters. Unfortunately, I do think that ship has already sailed. He still gets to pull the martyr card. And now he gets to take this as a win, essentially. And right, all press for Trump is good press, of course. We know that to be true. And so I think that if that's the case, I see it just increasing his support. And then if he's pulled from the ballot, then I almost don't know if I want to think exactly where that might go, because
no, kind of walk me through that. I mean, because also Aaron Niederman, this brilliant young activist. You're from another generation than mine, and there's a world, Reverend Wilson and Reverend Yeary, that only Aaron knows. Aaron didn't fight for a black president. That's what he's known. Aaron's also only known war. That's it. I was coming of age when we were coming out of Vietnam. There were other things that were going on. I mean, so I kind of want to dig in your head a little bit, in your thinking, Aaron. Like, what do you see? What are you feeling in the zeitgeist? Where could this go?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you are right that I have lived a different experience than y'all for sure, given when I was born. I'll provide a little hint. You mentioned the Bush-Gore election. I was 3 years old when that happened. Y'all can do the math.
See what I mean? Todd and Jeanette. Oh my gosh. We had voted in 1,000 elections already. Go on.
And I mean, I just think that if Trump is taken off the ballot, at least in some places, there's this whole trend that's going on, right? We've saw Biden is the only challenger. All the others were excluded.
And how democratic is that?
And how democratic is that exactly? He's had all this floundering recently, unfortunately, and these hearings. He's been shown to be not exactly there mentally, unfortunately. And of course, those are kind of unfair in a variety of ways too. I think that's important to note. But all of this as well in the context of this unfolding violence in Palestine. I think that when I talk to people in my generation, there's a real discontent building. And so if our hands are tied as voters to just simply go along with the status quo and all these decisions are made on our behalf, I think that it is not going to benefit our democracy, people's own political education. Maybe we'll end up in a better situation for 4 years than we would without Trump if Biden is going to be elected in this way. But I think it's going to continue to lead people to be unhappy with our government, with our political system. And maybe that will be good long term, but I think it's a step back, and especially, we saw this announcement from Netanyahu just I think a day ago about a ground invasion in Rafah. If we see all of these Palestinians, millions being pushed into Egypt, that is undeniable ethnic cleansing, undeniable. And if Biden does not do anything to condition aid to put a stop to U.S. funding of this ethnic cleansing, we're going to see people taking to the streets, and we're going to see people. I hope it doesn't get violent, but I can only imagine what's going to ensue.
See, Reverend Wilson, I think it's important to hear from Aaron, because I mean that's what's out here. Those feelings, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think Aaron's generation pretty much all on the same page. Many of them are already saying they're not voting. They don't believe in this system. They don't see how it's moving forward in a progressive way. And I think that between now and November, we have to really do a real serious education program. It's hard to justify some of the stuff that is happening in what we call a democracy. And so this Supreme Court handling of this Denver case is just one of many cases that we're faced with Trump. And I think that it is what Dr. Uri has said. These are all test cases challenging the very essence of our Constitution and our understanding or lack of understanding. And meanwhile, he's marching us aggressively towards civil war. Because when people are confused and unhappy and underfunded and under-resourced, they don't feel they have anything to lose. Those people that stormed the Capitol felt that they had nothing to lose.
Well, let me ask you this. Is he leading it or is he holding open the door?
I think he's doing both. He opened the door and he is encouraging and leading it. And he feels that he being Trump, if I appointed the majority of the court, I feel like I have control of the federal district courts and the United States Supreme Court. He is a very smart man. People laughed at Hitler, they're laughing at him, but he is very clear on moving the needle in terms of the exercise of presidential powers. Remember,
but you know what? But Jeanette, when I see the Democrats shut down all challengers in 2024, that to me is dictatorial. Absolutely. I don't see. There's not a lot of daylight there for me. I only have like 3.5 minutes left. I would like to just because we'll be coming back on the show, but I want to get a couple of minutes in from Pastor Uri, from Reverend Dr. Uri Esquire.
I think where Reverend Wilson is going, and the point of it's both. We heard and we have heard that in the minds of the folks who showed up in D.C. on January 6th, they came at the express direction of the former president.
Mm-hmm.
They were relaying what they believed were messages from the former president. And they are hoping that the former president becomes the 47th president of the United States so that he can remove the stain of their convictions from their records. This is more than who's going to sit in the big chair in the Oval Office. This is about what are they going to do while they sit in the big chair in the Oval Office. Who's going to benefit and who's going to be potentially harmed? That's the issue about elections. To the point about what do you do is we have to now encourage folks to participate at levels that exceed 2020. That every person that has the right to vote should exercise it. And even though there will be formidable obstacles placed in the way in many of those states, we have to recognize, as our ancestors did, that we must do what's required in the moment. We have to play the game as the rules exist, not as we wish the rules were. We learned that from Reverend Jackson when he forced a change in the rules of the Democratic Party of winner take all. He created a coalition, he created a movement that leveraged the ability to play the game under rules that we wish were different. But if we're going to change them, we have to master them first and then make adjustments to them second. And that's what I think we've seen from both sides, the former president and also from President Biden. The Democratic National Committee exists to protect itself. The RNC exists to protect itself. They're not about the interest of their constituents. They're about the interest of the entity. When we look at Citizens United gives corporations the definition of persons.
I got
Think
15
about
seconds. Yeah.
just real quick, that part ought to cause all of us great pause. So everybody's got to do their part. We've got to be ready, and we have to channel our frustrations to making sure our voices are heard so that we can change the rules where they're more fair for everybody.
And do it. I mean, and look, get in touch with Reverend Dr. Yeary at Rainbow Push and at Douglas Memorial Community Church, Reverend Jeanette Wilson, rainbowpush.org. Of course, if not now, please get in touch with Aaron Niederman. And I'm Santita Jackson. Meet me on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and Santita Jackson and Friends at AM 950 Radio every weekday morning from 6 to 8. May God bless you. Have a great one. All right, you guys. Thank you so much. Because of the technical issues that we're having, I'm having to record this way, and thank you for cooperating with me.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Blessings to you. God bless.
Great to be here with all of you.
Likewise. Santita, let's talk offline and figure out what the transition looks like for AM 950.
Okay, all right.
Make sure that it's smooth. All right.